Hello everyone. Today's talk is an interesting one, and it will be focusing on different views on presence. Presence is not your personality, and who do you think you are at first. Presence is how there's an aspect of you that is existing without movement, without anything, while you're here. It is the mere knowing that you exist and you're alive. Now, I want you to visualize, Mr. Within wants you to visualize that today, when you woke up, you're doing certain things. Now, visualize from this moment on that everything that you're doing, there's also another subtler version of you observing you doing it a bit slower. So in other words, you're thinking, in the abstraction of your thinking, begin to see how life would be if you slowed things down. And one of the greatest things that a being can do is adjust his speed of receiving things and interpreting things from a reactive kind of way to one that is very consciously done. So what that means is that if there's a sudden explosion, you're not just reacting, you're as still as it can be, because you're not oriented based on the temporal and form, because form is always changing. You need to have an existential orientation beyond your ideology. So if someone's asking you what your truth is, you need to know that it's unspeakable because it's vast and it's within you. It is some things that people will never understand because they don't have your whole memory. They don't have your set of design of how you're exactly remembering things and how you've experienced things. You know, they don't even have your experience. So to be honest, human beings communicating right now is one where they are creating each other for each other when they talk. Right now, my communication is creating imagery for you. And so we are co-creating together. So it's very important that in any co-creation, in any existential communication, there is honesty. There is not a concept of dishonesty even. There is no dynamic where you are limited in ways where the limitless is always teasing you. It's not like that. It's very important for you to see that clarity is more than just certainty and form. Clarity is just more than having the right information. There is no right information because the receiver and you as a self-aware being can transition in how your understanding of real shifts for you. Reality is, in a sense, our engagement with what we see to a point that there's evidence that we're real. I've had many real experiences, and I do not consider my dreams to not be real at all. I believe that they are not relevant to how we are acknowledging it in the mainstream. How you acknowledge a human being in the mainstream, it's okay, it's just the mainstream option, you know? Once you begin seeing who you really are, you see that your consciousness does not even to be built on linearity. So what that means is there was a point in me being suddenly, going into school and going into the conditioning of our educational system that I just suddenly noticed, wait a minute, why am I doing, for example, work for a certain ideology rather than doing work for the ideologies that are real for me, right? So when I thought about that, I noticed that the knowing is beyond ideology. So the game is never about who has the best truth or is there God or not. The actuality is that we pay attention to our experience to a point where we're existentially sensitive. And that makes us and gives us an understanding of the observer that we are. The observer is always beyond the object of observance. And so you will see clarity becomes how you initiate yourself with others in the co-creation that you create. Co-creation is the allowance of creation. So when people question how is there co-creation when it's all the same, well, the reason it's like that is because the creation has an ability to observe itself in segmented views. And so what that means is what we find to be a curious natural phenomena for us is actually the intention of other beings who are in a sense co-creating that moment. So when you begin to see the intelligence of co-creation, it's one that's non-linear in the sense that it's giving your linearity infinite possibility to move. So in any dimension, you get a very vast sense of conception. So what that means is if before I was only thinking that I'm this guy with this name and this is me, I later on realized in my engagement and involvement and authentic involvement, in other words, very sincere action, right? So in other words, I got rid of the lies. I got rid of any lies I was saying to myself even, and I just stood there in nature. And when I did, I began seeing that it's the ability of your mind to see beauty. It must be taught that you must cultivate a beautiful world in your eyes. Because the way our world is being communicated by the mainstream doesn't seem that clean. It's cluttered, it's messy. So what that means is if you assume that what the mainstream is saying is real and you react to it, it's as if you're working in clumsiness. You must come back and you must go walk away from the city as many sages have done, and just in the mountains, in your own solitude and stillness, in your absolute sense of direct experience, perceive what it is that you are to then be what it is that you are here to do. You will begin seeing that all that I'm saying is a flow in regards to how your intelligence moves. The linear intelligence is you wake up, and if you had the ability to watch yourself a bit slower, you would totally have new ideas. What that means is if the human being recognizes that his subtler planes are his self-communication and his observance of himself, you can realize we are so able as creators that in our abstraction, we co-create our own intelligence. We have self-reflective intelligence expressed in our subtler planes. When this is present, we look at how is this present? How is their abstraction? What is imagination? How is this nation unexplored? Why is this nation just, we can't put an image to it, but it's called imagination, What's with the images? And so you must observe the nature of your eyes. The study no longer is in books or in schools. The school has come to where your vision began. The minute you opened your eyes, your study was there. The minute you open your eyes, you have transcended all senses of reality to be in a new creation to then co-create. What that means is the creator who is conscious in this plane of existence will see that in his very vast and compassionate giving co-creation, he will elevate his consciousness to a point where he is giving away things so freely, where it's no longer given away and it's natural movement. He no longer calls it intuition, it's just how life is flowing. And it's as if at that point, everything in the cosmos decides and sees that you have become a being who is not, it's not that you're convinced or not, it's not that you're bothered whether there's an illusion. You don't care there's an illusion or not. On some subtle level you do, but you're not bothered by it. And you just, everything you're given in your moment, you give away and you study. You observe the moment of existence that you are and the transitions that are happening to you. It is time for you to enhance your perception beyond the ideology that is trapping you into a certain form, which you are calling very, very, very arrogantly human. How arrogant are we to name a certain aspect of creation in this infinitely changing world? So if we have chosen to be arrogant, we need to at least have clarity in our arrogance. So what that means is we must take a stand in regards to that we're individual beings. We are individual beings. And very playfully, I can say, where you are shows you where you can be, in which then you will understand you are already there, for you are here. The nature of this reality opens to you experientially. So what that means is we have certain seekers in the spiritual path and the intuitive path that they begin seeing that, okay, so I'm understanding things more than my idea. I had that moment where I sat down and I just got tired of my life and I just pressed pause on this game. And so as I pressed pause on this game, I saw what was there, who was perceiving the screen. And so when people see that, whether they have near-death experiences or other experiences consciousnesses, they're experiencing life in a way where it's beyond what's said now. That's simply how we have an artist. That's simply how we have a poet, because these people, these moments of existence are experiencing things in a way where it's enhancing their perception, as if a great wind has just opened doors that had never opened before. And so you see that it's as if the doors open and the wind comes in, but there's no one entering. And so you see it's as if life has opened doors for you. So it's very important for you to see that your sight is present, and in this presence, what is being kept? And if there is a keeper, and if in the love of man to see his creator, was there ever a separation? If you were observing yourself a bit slower throughout the day, you would appreciate yourself more. You would appreciate your investment into activities more. So what that means is you no longer are going the way where you're like, gosh, I don't want to do this, I can't do this. Every task that comes to you, you bring the intensity of the whole cosmos, and you know you can do it regardless of the template. Your intention of doing the act is there, then you see how authentically you have understood the material or the content. See, knowing things is you always know how to do things because life knows, and in certain moments you're not the only being existing there. We are multi-present, and our multi-presence is a playful abstraction. So what that means is right now what Mr. Within is doing is recognizing that society is acknowledging itself based on a certain individuality. So what that means is the cells of this organism, which we call our cultural phenomena, and our social system, is actually how the individuals will begin realizing, wow, the whole society is based on a wrong observation. What that means is experimentation is done, and it gives you clarity, and oh gosh, you can see it so you can believe it. But at that moment, you will see that it's not that science is something that is trying to teach you. Science should be accurate, not based on what man thinks. So science must have an ability to be seen as a system where it organizes itself in a way where the individuality has always an ability to be seen as a collective presence. Because if it is not, then immediately you're trapping the human being, in a realm of isolation where they think, gosh, is this it? No, this is never it. Remember, this is never it. That is the point. This is the pilots of consciousness will know this innately. This is never it. Because you are present. You are the new moment. In any moment you exist, your consciousness, your sense of being alive is beyond the ideology of hate and love. But love is closer to showing you how you can get there. So when an ideology is trapped, when a being is trapped in solitude, guess what heals? It's love. And there must also be love to the ideology. And so what that means is you must always love the fact that you have done things however the way you have done it. And you must be immediately comfortable, and do not let your past to create a sense of you that will delay the greatness that you're heading towards. So pretty much the individuals in a society will begin to understand that it is up to them to redefine their individuation. And the only way they can do it is by getting a collective awareness. The collective awareness is an existential one. So what that means is there will come a point in your life where you will stop the comparison, you will stop the shenanigans, and you will observe it. And if you're not attentive to it, oh gosh, it'll be harsh. So if you're not mindful, if you're not aware of where your life is heading, you can always know. Because there's a simultaneous sense of intelligence regardless of the chronology, in regards to how space and time is formed. So we must see that how reality is kept is, in a sense, by the moment where you see you can give yourself more existential allowance to be alive with your fellow man. The psychology of man is one where the minute it can identify a condition, it also identifies it based on a certain characteristic. And so if a characteristic has projected a condition and suddenly the being doesn't notice that it's one characteristic projecting the condition, he will think the whole process is trapped. So God has found a way to make himself feel he's not God, and he's so far from it. And so the humankind is wondering, where are these gods? Are they in the clouds? You know, and you see they might be in your clouds of thought, actually, because you will see that your perception is one where it's based on how you are acknowledging reality. You go at your own speed. Your consciousness has its own acceleration. Your insight comes in your own way. And so in your understanding that the same graceful phenomena of life is happening to others around you, you will see that you don't need to protect that vase on the table that might fall down and break. You need to protect human life. Your car cannot be more precious than human life. So what that means is there's a very profound story of and I want to simply show you guys the depth of humility in human nature. And I'm going to share two stories with you. And there's this one woman who's a female sage, and she's walking by a river. You know, these are Zen stories. And as she's walking by the river, she suddenly finds a huge ruby. Like she's walking by, imagine her foot suddenly hits something, and gosh, it's the biggest ruby that every museum is seeking. She finds this ruby and she picks it up. She's like, okay, she doesn't really have any feelings for it or any opinions on what she has found. She just picks it up, and it's comfortable to hold, and it's interesting, so she takes it. She has a good feel. As she's going by, suddenly from her solitude nature trail walk, she suddenly gets to a city, and some guy suddenly is going home with bread and just sees this woman, sees the sage, female sage, with a ruby in her hand. And she's just walking as if like she has an apple in her hand, so simple. This guy, literally, it's as if he reacts, and he immediately runs up to the lady and tells her, give this ruby to me now. As if like it's like, I'm not even asking, lady, just give it, And this female sage, as simply as she picked up that rock, as simply gives it to the man and smiles. And she continues, she walks. This guy takes the ruby, hides it, uses the bread to hide the ruby, and runs home, with this crumbled up bread in his hand, holding a ruby. And he goes and sits on his table and looks at the ruby. And as he's sitting on his ruby, and before the lottery winning thoughts come into his mind, he suddenly stops and he looks at the rock on the, twisted up bread on the table. And as he's watching it, in that emptiness, it's as if internally something happens. And he realizes, wow, the treasure is not this magnificent ruby twisted in bread on the table, The true treasure is how able that female sage was to give away that treasure in an instant. Because treasure revealers are not, they're not seeking treasure like how normal people do. They are selflessly seeking treasure, and so their revelation is for all existence. So it's as if we are no longer considering us to be these temporal objects that have barely any purpose because they can't see their purpose. We are seeing that this is the most intense examination and intense observation and intense, let's say, creator's table, writer's table of the creator. So what that means is that I am the newest moment in this existence, and so perhaps my words are the greatest phenomena observed by everything. Because if one individual human being has found the ability to acknowledge everything outside of his individuality, it's as if life has always acknowledged you. Your future was never ahead. Your past was never behind. You were transcendent, and so your experience was multidimensional in the sense that stillness and movement coexist to then be an observance that is unspeakably your directest experience of life. The second story, guys, I want to very quickly share is the one about Guru Arjan. And Guru Arjan is a very, very profound guru. And I very spontaneously, just from a picture on a friend's house suddenly saw this picture of this guru, and just I got very interested to know who he is. And guess what? I think it was purposeful, because Guru Arjan was this enlightened, he was just a social figure, and he was just also a very spiritual presence back in the day. And so how the story goes is that three guys from another village suddenly hear, oh my God, this Guru Arjan, we gotta go see this, you know? And just like how people here would go on a road trip, these three guys go to see this, you know, enlightened being. As they're going, there's the stop. So that means there's like, it'd be too long for them to continue, so they have to stay for one night at some inn or somewhere, right? So while going to the city where Guru Arjan was, they stop at this just little house that's there. As they stop in that little house, suddenly some old guy comes in, you know, some old guy, and this old guy is just such a nice guy. And so pretty much this old guy, suddenly it's as if he's like, I don't know, there's some serene quality to this old guy. And pretty much he begins organizing these guys' shoes and making beds for them. I'm giving them food, and just randomly, he's like this guy with dirty clothing, and he's just giving these guys a lot of, you know, comfort, let's say. You know, so he's helping them. He's pretty much helping them, because back then it wasn't like they had motels and stuff. You know, it wasn't like they had hotels. It was pretty much survival. Do you know? So pretty much after that, what happens is that the next day those guys wake up, you know, and so gosh, their shoes are so aligned, and so they wear their shoes and they leave, you know, and they're like, wow, this it's as if like they're like the city of this enlightened guy is even nice, you know, as we're getting closer. So as these guys walk, they begin going into the town. And so they suddenly see all the people very happily excited running towards the center, where they see Guru Arjan sitting down. And these three guys fall on their knees, and some part of them is just watching in such understanding that Guru Arjan was the same guy who cleaned their shoes. Do you know? So that guru did not even though he was the highest figure and everyone in town was going up to them, he took himself to the lowest part, where he cleaned the shoes of the visitors of the city. That means this being was not just compassionate of the whole city, but his existence and intuition carried them in many directions. And of course, there's a deeper aspect to this, in the sense that there's a multi-presence in how a being could coexist in many ways, you know. However, that's for another talk. And the moral of that story was that you as a being, regardless of the greatness you are, you must always instantly have an ability to be humble and to see where that greatness is coming from. Because you are great because others are not. Because if everyone was great, you would not have a greatness. You would be, it's a great world. You won't be, I'm a great man in a world that's not great. Your mind would be thinking as if this is a great world. And now guys, as I've suggested, as Mr. Within has suggested, for you to observe yourself slowly throughout the day, and if you were to visualize how that would be in your subtler sense of abstraction, you will begin seeing that if you were to also project your visualization to see that what would your future knowing be, it's as if like you know something in the future, you will see that creation is nothing, actually. And as creation is observed, there is everything. But the observance is not creation. So it's that interesting phenomena where you see, wow, the word nothing, again, is saying no thing. So it's a greater dimension in which paradoxical understanding suggests the development of the mind to see not just one side, to not see right or wrong, but to see the understanding of the sky rather than the clouds that are constantly fading. We must have systems where people can immediately tap into and tune in to their self-remembrance. So what that means is your self-remembrance is not you remembering yourself as a past life, as a figure. No, 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 no. It's you observing what you are right now and observing it so deeply that your self-remembrance is getting rid of your segmentation of space and time, which constantly make you think you're a projection that is lost in a karmic cycle that in a sense was never there. Because once you see where the essence of creation is, you're never stuck. The plane of existence is always being navigated by the pilot of consciousness. Know yourself and you know all there is, because simply you are the awareness of all there is. Awareness is survival, because without awareness there's not existence. Without awareness, without self-awareness, we're objects. Or we're objects that are perhaps more biological. You know, there are transitions in intelligence because every detail we see right now is being an infinite point of co-creation, not by us, by that which is conceiving us. So in other words, man, it's very important that many people recognize, as Mr.Within would say, that in this time we need to begin understanding things based on how our science saying, in the sense of templates and simulations in regards to how we are transcending our systems, and at the same time we need to cultivate an understanding of the profound empty platform that is the direct experience of life and awareness to what existence really means. Because if we are multidimensional beings, it is arrogance that we're saying, oh gosh, I'm such an academic that I'm just I'm saying the same things that people said and I'm not moving beyond their way of thought. You know, it's very interesting for me because, and of course I'm saying this very playfully, but if we took all the psychedelics that the youth are taking and giving it to all the scientists and all the quantum theorists and all those people who think that this world is as firm as the hammer of the judge, you need to see that if all these psychedelics were given to these scientists, their experience will tell them that no reality needs to be framed so solidly. Because it's not a human body, you are not an object experiencing it. When you look at someone else, they are objective. When you look externally, when you open your eyes, there's external objectification, but your knowing of it when you look at yourself, it's subjective. That subjectivity leads to an emptiness where you are an observant of existence. This observance of existence is beyond the ideology that considers itself something that can move. If you were an aspect of existence that could not move, how could you even create your illusion? How could you even have duality be in the same room with you? Conception is one where it shakes itself constantly. What that means is it's that moment when the inventor has probably for example, months created the same machine, created the design, his newest invention, and suddenly seen that everything was built wrong. And completely throws away months and months of work and focus into a certain design to incorporate a new design. Because we must take risks in our sciences to see beyond the way they were thinking before. We have a responsibility to explode into creative realms with the information we have now, because look at our society, look at our globalization. If the greatest inventors, if Isaac Newton could come back and see the world we have now, his vision would be grand. He would be like, guys, forget what I said, look at what I'm going to say now. And so we must realize that that same intensity, that same knowing is within the eyes of every human being that is existing. It's now time to understand yourself more than humanity. Be playful with yourself, be playful with your ideology. Guilt, depression, these are all based on a sense of self. Observe that sense of self, and immediately you do, in your presence it will dissolve. It is now time to move clearly. Clarity is your number one focus. Clarity is abundance. Self-awareness is abundance. Other wealth is second levels of abundance. Your first one is self-awareness. You must have an awareness to your being. If suddenly something is happening, before an earthquake comes, you must so be tuned to your present moment that you feel the shake before. It's not that you must not even let your physical body get to a point where there is sickness. You must be so aware that if one single turbulence comes, the pilot immediately fixes it. Because the pilot knows that if the plane gets turbulent, the psychologies of the passengers gets turbulent. And what that means, if when the plane of existence is not clear of itself, then the individuals in it will think it's an apocalypse. So to be honest, actually, the greatest gurus recognize that they're not here to teach man. They are here to, in a sense, be an aspect of the knowing of the plane of existence, of the dimension in which this reality is. So I am here for this plane of existence. And this voice is a simple effect of the cause that is everything. Once you begin forgetting thought, forgetting all these ideologies and philosophies, and seeing that you're either living for life or you're living for some individualized life that will show you that life is nothing, it's very important what kind of being you are. We need advanced communicators. The pilots of consciousness are recognizing that your knowing here is serving the cosmos. My presence is not here just for me to go and do, smile for my boss, let's say, as the average man does. You're here to, in a sense, be that your physical work is just a simple part of your experience. So what that means is you don't need to suddenly get rid of your ego. You don't need to suddenly get rid of your job and go to India and try to meditate like that. You simply need to see that your work and all your ideology that is based on a certain individuation is only a little aspect of your greater experience, which is a greater observance of reality. So what that means is you will suddenly go and you will be so selfless because you are having such a profound and ecstatic experience of life that you will see that your productivity will be so simple. People will look at you and wonder, why is it being done so smoothly, and why is there nothing to say about it, even from the person who's doing it? Because the silence of nature knows. Because nature, it does not let you die. It shows you that everything lives. What that means is our psychology must not suddenly be conditioned for years on thinking that we're one solid frame. You must have a chaotic artist in your mind and an ordered engineer. And these two must build some of the greatest realities you will experience here. Because the engineer that brings order is always tolerant of the chaos that gives it its understanding. And the chaotic artist is basking the permission of the ordered universe to explode into new forms. Because transcendence means the dissolution of the ideology that could not see its collective into the collective that always knew of its individuality. That knowing is actually perhaps some of the most profoundest elements that one can get in exploring themes such as nirvana and enlightenment. Because it's not a game, it's not a story. I mean, enlightenment at first, you're like, gosh, that's cool. That sounds like I could level up in this reality I'm in. But it's not like that. It's actually you giving yourself a moment of observance to very deeply see what life means for you. And once you see it deeply, you're like, gosh, I'm thinking about what to do after school. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do after I die. That's the true concept that we should look at. Because the greatest lesson that every person learns is that death. There is death. Death is the last lesson you learn. Because it's the last lesson where you're projecting, not projecting, but in a sense innately returning back to the spark in which your emanation was coming from. So your emanation is still there. The memory is still there, but you are not that memory. You are the greater observance that has just contributed that to a sphere of knowing. And that sphere of knowing is this sector of our existence. It's very important for you to see that if you are not observing life, then you are the object that's moving and being observed. So you will always feel it's as if everyone around you is more certain. It's as if the life of everyone is better. Because you're associating more as an object in this life. An object is individual enough to get depressed. And when I say object, that means objective thinking. You thinking that you are a certain shape and gosh, this shape is not fitting in. That's wrong. That's not the case. You're not a shape, you're a changing shape. And a changing shape reveals that there is no shape. And so in a world of infinite change, the fact that I've been able to call myself with the same name for this whole time is amazing, because I'm pretty sure I could have experienced every single name out there. And so it is what we are given, in which at first we want to, in a sense, keep, but then we realize in giving away, we understand that it was never ours because that was never us. So perhaps some of the greatest gifts that one may give, and perhaps a gift that Mr. Within will give you, is that see that your ideology is something, but in its observance, there's nothing to see. Similar to that person who writes down a random telephone note just for himself to, for example, call someone later. You know, it's unessential for nothing. It's an internal phenomena that happens and continues. There's a lot of internal phenomena that happens and it does not need to be communicated. Similar to how you don't communicate certain personal aspects of yourself. So similarly, right now in our culture, we have not established ways of acknowledging imagination efficiently. And so that's what Mr. Within is trying to do. To, in a sense, it's about time we get this renaissance going, man. This renaissance is one where it's not a movement, again, externally. It's the first renaissance, it's the first movement in human consciousness where every human being is sitting down, being still, and becoming self-aware. And it's as if you're moving from personality that's in a certain way to presence. And so you must never forget that your external experience is being kept by an internal experience that is unknown. What you know is right there with the unknown. And so it is your transparency that is the greatest allowance for you to become the newest co-creation. For the pilot of consciousness always knew how to fly. You are a being who you realize that all those times you thought you were nervous, you were never nervous. It's just you did not apply the intensity of your life's work there. So what that means is if you're nervous, you do not have enough of a passion to give that speech. Do you think Martin Luther King was nervous? No, he was waiting for that podium perhaps. And of course he might have been nervous on some subtle level, but he knew that it's as if no, the message is more important than the individual's feeling. It's as if his whole body, Martin Luther King could have had a flu and his flu was immediately kicked out by his intention to communicate. If you have healthy intentions, nothing unhealthy can come to you. Because you are the creation of the health. Every moment of your being and your self-awareness. So when we see that Martin Luther King communicated that message and he said, I have a dream. You know, everybody has a dream, but why was his dream different? Because he communicated externally. Because externally we are immature, but internally we're wise. And so we must allow this flow of wisdom to integrate. And so what that means is we must trust not the external projections, but also the internal views. The mind of man is very vast, and in that vastness it knows how to maintain itself. Nature knows how to take care of you more than you thinking you know how to take care of nature by picking up a few plastic bags. Instead of picking up trash, pick up the trash in your mind. Find clarity, immediately seek clarity. You're a being who needs to utilize the most efficient technologies, and these efficient technologies means ones of understanding. So you're not seeking information as if you're trying to seek money to put in a bank account. You are in a sense seeking how your experience is relevant to everything. And so in your study of yourself, in studying yourself, which no one really talks about, you will really understand that you have the ability because you are present, because you exist as much as everything else. That president, which you think might be the only, he might be the luckiest guy for having that much control, even though there isn't much control anyways, you would see that you are creating the pedestals in which they are giving you limitation. Do not keep pedestals, be humble, be sincere, and understand that sincerity comes with clarity. And the most authentic clarity is as simple as how when you throw a rock in a pond, the pond, after its last ripple, gives you the greatest reflection of the sky, which is limitless. It's limitless. We must create the space for our next greatest creation. The inventor at times might see that before he even creates his invention, the users of technology must shift even. And so the users of technology shift in a way where their experience must shift. So even for our technologies to advance, we can't constantly be acknowledging ourselves as ego. We're realizing tolerance to abstraction, tolerance to multidimensionality and how imagery becomes present, tolerance into how imagery becomes an experience. So whenever someone is having, let's say some kind of hallucination, we are calling it on one level hallucination, but for that person it's real. That's why it looks like a hallucination. So we must also respect the fact that for that person, he was experiencing it in a real sense. Do you know? And so if we are really considering ourselves as a fair justice system, we must be just in observing the reality of that person. And so we might find that hard to do, but hopefully we may develop greater platforms of communication, because communication is the wealth for humankind. So if you're a person and you're like, gosh, what's my ambition? What's my purpose? You'll be like, okay, so the purpose of me is to survive, so I'm gonna go get rich. Many people have this mentality. But if you begin to see, wait a minute, what's the purpose of humankind? It's not money. It's authentic, natural communication. You want to be a healthy communicator in your environment, and your health comes from the environment, from nature, from your knowing. So similar to how a profound man, a very realized being named Shri Prabhupada, if I'm saying that right, of the Krishna consciousness movement, regardless of even you hearing any teaching this guy has to say, you just see his life story was that he was a yogi in India, and his guru tells him to go print books. And he goes with this intuition, with this knowing. And that is the true significance of a spiritual man, in that he will trust life in ways that it is his purest devotion to this creator as creation. And his creator is all life. Because all life is giving you the image of your individuality. It's your collective, everything that you see that is spiraling around into the same point in which you're seeing your multi-presence. And you will see Shri Prabhupada came to America, and it's his intention, his will, his focus, driven with the alignment of what the moment is communicating, presented a greater realm. And so it seemed that many people who at that time would take LSD, it seemed that they transferred to the Krishna consciousness movement. Of course, this is before my time. Something significant also about Shri Prabhupada, I found that you see yogis in their direct experience become comfortable as a presence that is just aware. It's a presence that is present, it is formless, and that is why it is able. It becomes a clear channel for expression from the formless into a manifestation of form. You're aware of that space. As you're aware of that space, you see that mankind is thought, again, that it's moving in a certain way, time and space. But for the realized being, it's as if, for him, he knew how to bring a moment of simultaneous acknowledgement. And that is the profound thing about a realized being, in which they can go sit in a park, and what's the difference between this guy and that guy on the other side who's doing something else on the park, is that this yogi, for example, sat down and just gave everything that was, and just received from all life. And that is when your intuition becomes no longer your opinions. It no longer becomes your creation to even think it can be a hallucination. It becomes where everything is heading, and where you and your vision are, in a sense, present in. I hope that this talk has inspired your own self-exploration of what consciousness means to you. Do not keep limitations, and if you do, at least be playful with them. Do you know, if you're saying this is going to be it, if I'm only going to be this, at least be playful with it, because playfulness also gives you the space to bring in new experiences. So when you're playful, you suddenly find treasure in ruins, you know? It's like that guy who went to the ruins because he thought, he was worth, but suddenly just, realized, oh my God, there's a treasure box and no one's looked at it because this place is, ruined. Because people think that it will ruin you. Because people think that ideology can wreck a person, and they're attacking the idea of the person, not realizing the harm they are doing to the actual person. We must really become aware of life. And in doing so, there is always the clarity of our next step. Much blessings. And namaste.
Я вас любил так искренне, так нежно, как дай вам Бог, любимый был.